Honourable Chief Whip of the Opposition.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I have not much to say to the acting Deputy Chief Whip, other than to say one wonders what the chaos would have been if it hadn't been for the opposition. But at the outset, Deputy Speaker, allow me to join the Speaker and the many millions of people all over the world in wishing our beloved Madiba well. Siyakukhumula ngesithandathu zethu, Tata. Also, Speaker, at an occasion like this, it's only natural to give recognition, and in this regard, I wish to pay tribute to the Speaker for I actually wish to pay tribute to him for his stewardship of this institution. And as I did a few weeks ago, I want to thank him for at last, there as the occasions were, to acknowledge the true role of Parliament as the nodal point where issues facing South Africa should be debated. But, Deputy, you must ask yourself whether we have gone far enough to ensure that Parliament regains its rightful place as the centre of debate in this country. Parliament's budget is 2 billion rand, but who would have thought that it would take so much money for Parliament to do so little? The House does not debate legislation all the time. This House does not debate issues of public importance. The House does not summon anyone to appear before it. The House does not debate committee oversight reports. The House rarely debates draft resolutions. And the House most definitely does not debate motions of no confidence. Maar as young Speaker, miskien is ek nou 'n bietjie onregverdig teenoor hierdie huis. Want verlede jaar het ons 30 uur toegewy aan debatte met betrekking tot feesvieringe, herdenkings, gelukwensings en allerlei seremonies. Gelukkig het ons ook die ontvangs van die langverwagte nasionale ontwikkelingsplan gedebatteer. Anders sou die president seker nooit 'n afskrif ontvang het nie. Maar op 'n ernstige noot, mevrou, ons het bitter min tyd gewy om die sake te debatteer waarvoor die kiesers ons hierheen gestuur het. Verlede jaar is sommige wetsontwerpe goedgekeur sonder enige debatte hoegenaamd, terwyl sake van daadwerklike openbare belang selde of ooit hier bespreek word. Die DA het byvoorbeeld 8 versoeke ter tafel gelê vir debatte van openbare belang. Oor aangeleenthede wat wissel van die handboeke-krisis tot die Nkandla debakel. Maar vir watter tegniese redes die Speaker dit ook al geweier het, moet u weet dat die weiering die mense van ons land ontneem het van daardie besprekings. Thankfully, after our efforts, the Gupta debate took place a few weeks ago. And it proved to be the vital contribution that Parliament can make to the national discourse. For once, members were not sat here reading the news on their iPads and bored to sleep by the vacuous rhetoric that pervades during most sessions. By simply debating things that matter to the public, by simply doing their job, members were once again making Parliament relevant. And this should be the norm, Deputy Speaker, not the exception. You know full well that power corrupts and that absolute power corrupts absolutely. But do you know how frustrating it is to sit on that side of the House, powerless to prevent the absolute corruption of government? Do you know how frustrating it is to have all of our efforts as opposition heckled, thwarted, belittled, mocked, blocked and ridiculed by members of the ANC? Do you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, how frustrating it is to constantly be denied any real opportunity for public accountability? Deputy Speaker, it is vital that the National Assembly starts speaking the truth to power, because whilst the President said he was waging a war against corruption, the war that the President has raised is against the very opposite of that. In fact, the war that this President has raised is against every attempt at open and public accountability, and its first victim is Parliament. The lack of respect that the Executive has for Parliament's oversight authority was captured perfectly a few weeks ago. the most important official report into executive corruption to have been released to the public this year, the Guptagate report, was deliberately withheld from Parliament until the debate had started. Thank you. 218 written questions were not answered by ministers last year, and the answers we received are frankly a disgrace. The nonsense they sometimes contain insults the intelligence of the people of South Africa, and the arrogance of their tone demonstrates the contempt of our government towards accountability. Do you know that DA members sent 90 letters to ministers over the course of last year's parliamentary session? And do you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that none of our requests were acceded to? DA members also sent 70 letters to committee chairpersons requesting, for example, resolutions to summon a minister to the committee. And do you know what, Madam Deputy Speaker? None of our requests were acceded to. The Intelligence Committee has not reported on his work in years, and yet I've been refused my every suggestion to hold that committee to account. And now, the single most important report into executive corruption, the Nkandla report, has also been thrown into that parliamentary abyss. It's a shame. But worst of all, Deputy Speaker, is the fact that under this President, the National Assembly has not the esteem or the willpower to assert to its constitutional right of debating a motion of no confidence in the President. But to our shame, the blame cannot solely be laid on the President. Because how can members be expected to perform executive oversight when Parliament's administration cannot even produce minutes by the following week? How can members, I ask you, be expected to perform effective oversight when they have to adopt committee minutes for an entire term or even an entire year in one go sometimes? When committee reports are tabled months, even years after the event? And how, Deputy Speaker, can members be expected to perform effective oversight when virtually no committee reports are ever debated in this House? Fact is that Parliament has been tripped up by its incompetence and lethargy of its own administration. An administration that receives a whopping 400 million rand each year. Rigorous and meaningful oversight cannot happen under these conditions. And to the Speaker, I must say, I have not forgotten about you, like you forgot to respond to 19 of the 23 letters I sent you before Parliament closed last year. I have not forgotten, sir, about the 40 million rand your office receives on a yearly basis. But how many more millions of rand do you need before your administration starts responding to members timelessly? How many more millions of rand do you need before presiding officers start responding on the spot to points of order in this House? With a multi-million rand budget, this, Mr. Speaker, responding to letters and responding to points of order should not cause any operational strain. Your office needs fundamental transformation. You need more support in upholding the rules and making rules timelessly. Your office must no longer pride itself on organizing events and fanfare. Rather than pomp and ceremony, your office must be properly versed in parliamentary practice. It must guide you through the practices, procedures, and processes of a democratic parliament. But let us consider for a minute a more serious charge. Parliament is not immune from the plague of corruption. The very legislation that was meant to immunize this institution from corruption creates an environment that allows it to fester. The Financial Management of Parliament Act gives far too much power to only 3 individuals. The power that this Act gives to the Secretary of Parliament, the Speaker of the National Assembly, and the Chairperson of the NCOP is extraordinary. Giving unbridled power to only 3 individuals is like giving whiskey and car keys to a teenager. The power has led to officials from the office of the Deputy Speaker spending millions of rands on events without a single member ever seeing or agreeing to that budget. The so-called sectoral parliament events are drawn up by officials and officials alone. As things stand now, we will never know how much of that money falls into the waste basket of corruption. But we know, Mr. Speaker, that 2,100,000 rand went into the Chief Whip's Sugar Daddy Fund for President Zuma. I sincerely hope, Chief Whip, that the President rose to the occasion and gave your Interfaith Council a sterling speech and made you look good. I myself would not know, because opposition parties were not pre-informed and were not even invited to the event. Even more sickening is that officials in this institution, not members of parliament, see it fit to serve 16 million rands worth of platters, food platters, during meetings. So, to fix these fundamental powers, we need a budget that has been put together with members having proper oversight and input. Until such time as Parliament's presiding officers and secretary allow themselves to be held account for this budget by members of Parliament, this institution stands no chance of being fixed. Deputy Speaker, I have here in my hand a private member's bill aimed at amending the Financial Management of Parliament Act so that these errors could be rectified and these problems taken out of the way. But out of respect for the Portfolio Committee on Finance, which I'm informed is presently engaged in reviewing the Act, I decided to withhold it. But mark my words, Mr. Speaker, if the amended Financial Management of Parliament Act does not make the Secretary and the presiding officers more accountable and does not allow members of Parliament to have more say, then I will introduce a bill that will ensure that those in control of Parliament's money begin to account for their part in its cumbering demise. I thank you.